Hello, everyone. It's Anastasia Stoyanova with you today, and this is the second episode of my podcast. Whether you're listening to me or watching the video on YouTube, I'm really grateful that you're here and that you decided to spend this next half an hour with me. So, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about language learning and how I achieved C2 level in the English language, which is the highest level you could get if you climb up to the top of this ladder of proficiency, metaphorically speaking, of course. So, I will talk about how I learn languages, just a little bit more. If you haven't watched or haven't listened to the first episode, you're more than welcome to do so. I introduce myself in that episode and talk a little bit more about my background, as I do have background in linguistics and language learning. And in my life, I've learned 6 languages, like in a more serious manner, although I retained and I use only 4 out of 6, right as of now, which is September 13th today, 2025. So anyway, let's get started, yeah? And first of all, in this podcast, let me give you a little bit of overview and what I'm going to talk about today. I made a plan, so it's not fully scripted. As always, I never script my episodes, but I plan them a little bit, plan what I would like to say. So it will consist of 8 parts. They are not that big. I hope I can manage to squeeze them into half an hour. So a little bit of the introduction and how to build a foundation in every language. And then in the second part, I'll talk about grammar and vocabulary, 2 biggest skeletons of any language. And then also in the third part, I'll talk about my immersion experience, my real-world application of the languages that I had learned. Also, I will talk about learning through teaching as one of the parts of this podcast. And then also I will try to debunk the native environment myth that I think almost everyone has. And then also I'll talk about accent and some more advanced skills and how to get a grip and kind of nail those, get those, improve those skills. And then also I will share with you some takeaways and life lessons that I learned from language learning, because that experience is the one that shapes you, not just your professional and personal parts of your life, but also overall, I think it teaches you a lot, this kind of experience. So let's get started. And first and foremost, I'd like to say that I think the language that I have mostly been proud of is the English language, because, not even my native languages like Russian and Ukrainian that I also considered that I learned them, because, if you are born in a certain country, it doesn't mean that you will retain the language. Like in my case, I was born in the eastern part of Ukraine, and in the eastern part of Ukraine, just historically, it's like that a lot of people speak Russian, mostly in their homes. However, when it comes to being at school, they require the Ukrainian language, and actually both. At school, we learned both. So I remember when the time came and I had to take this national exam to get the diploma and to finish the school. I had to take both, right? And that was important, both the Russian language and the Ukrainian language. And back then, it was before I decided to become a teacher and get all the certificates that I got, numerous certificates like IELTS and other Cambridge certificates, and then Canadian certificates, because currently I am living in Toronto and teaching and working and developing my language business also in Toronto. It's never easy, so it was quite a journey, but a little bit of the foundation that I built, we'll talk about the first part, is that I was studying at a specialized school back in Ukraine, and specialized in a way that every school in Ukraine, almost every school, could have some kind of specialism, right? Could get, so to say, so-called like license in something. And my school, my primary, secondary, and high school, they were in the same building at the same place, and it was the same school, which was specialized in the foreign languages. In my case, I was learning English. I had 2 hours of English every day, almost like 2 lessons every day. Maybe some days I had only 1 lesson, but for a Ukrainian school, that was pretty amazing because in Ukraine, people have like, if it's a regular standard school, they might have 2 or 3 hours of the English language, and that's it. So definitely per week, not like every hour every day. But in my case, I had at least 1 hour every day, sometimes 2 hours. I also was learning German, I think since, I think I had been learning German like for almost 8 years, just at a school. I never retained it. I don't use German much these days. I use Russian at home. I use English and French for my work and some personal relationships. And also I use Ukrainian for my work because I do have a lot of also Ukrainians who speak Ukrainian, who choose to speak Ukrainian, or who, it's not even like choosing, they don't know Russian, right? They might be from the western part of Ukraine. So I have no other choice but to speak. And, it makes it great. My Ukrainian is also very good. I managed to retain it because I think because of the way they were teaching us, that was a quality teaching, and I had lots of practice. And believe it or not, but my national exam, I did better at the Ukrainian language rather than at the English language back in the day. Of course, now things have changed because I gained all the experience and certification. So foundation, first and foremost, that was the school. And the way, if in your childhood you had this nice foundation, or maybe for your child, you're planning on to give that kind of education. So that's great because the earlier, the better. And the way I see that is that unlike buying a product where you bought something and you see the product, you're pretty happy with the product. When it comes to language learning, results are not that immediate. And I think the key to building this foundation is accepting that results are not immediate and that you have to be patient. So that was in my case. I would say it's just when you start learning, whether for your child or for yourself, you gotta understand that this kind of investment is investment when it comes to effort, time, money. I remember my mom even wanted to pay for a special daycare for me and like a kindergarten before primary school. And I remember that I actually started reading and singing in the English language when I was 4. Can you imagine? And that was like a mix of languages at some point, but then it all evened out and it got more manageable. And I guess I was just, I was growing up surrounded by several languages, and that was the secret sauce, if you may call it, which means like something that, and a super special ingredient of success, yeah? Like a secret sauce of my linguistic personality that I have. But I think it's just the key to this foundation is not only background or having a special school. Even when you just started learning English, I think it's important, or maybe you're teaching English and you're listening to this podcast, or maybe you're just, curious and you want to get into this topic of linguistics and how to learn a language, I think the hardest part also is understanding learning patterns. And the learning curve reality is not that simple, because it's easy to notice the progress when it comes to beginner levels, but it's never easy to do that when you reach intermediate level. Like currently, I am at B2 level in French. I started B2 level, and this fall. So, and there is the plateau effect. Plateau, it means you feel stuck and you feel as if you're not making any progress. So in my case, that's with French. And believe it or not, but like a couple of years ago, I had zero French. I never learned the Romanian languages. You know that every language belongs to a group. Like, for example, the English language belongs to a Germanic group of languages. So believe it or not, but with French, that's like a whole a new episode that I really would like to record in the future, and just to tell you about my French learning journey, because it's not that easy. It's not that simple. When I started learning French, I was learning that for the immigration purposes, and then I quit for some time, which I really regret quitting. But it's just the reality. It's just happened. And anyway, but right now, I decided to keep going and make it as my hobby. And now, I am experiencing this intermediate plateau. Sorry about that. And I just wanted to say that understanding progress patterns is important. You progress very quickly, very fast when you're just beginning. And then when you reach that intermediate level, you feel as if you're stuck, and you have to accept that it's okay to be stuck like that and just give it more time. There is such a concept of language learning levels. And for example, Cambridge has even the official website based on the research that they did. The levels of the language, the levels are not that simple to understand, like it takes, according to them, don't quote me on this, double check that on the Cambridge website, just type language learning guided hours. But as far as I had checked before the podcast, approximately it takes 200 hours of guided learning practice with a teacher. It means 200 hours to achieve every level, like A1, A2, B1, B2. And it also says that when you achieve certain level, the higher your level is, the more hours it's required. Like ideally, you have to like almost as if multiply it by 2, right? So the more hours, the better. That's the thing, but like approximately 200 hours per level. And I think it gets harder when you achieve intermediate level. Nobody talks about that. But okay, even if you achieved that B2 level, nice and sweet, and you have that stable upper intermediate level, I think it's even harder to achieve that C2 level. But I managed to do that. And I think without further ado, let me talk about some specifics. That's the second part of my podcast today, of my episode. What kind of grammar, what kind of vocabulary, what kind of topics do you need? First and foremost, I think in every language you have to learn essential communication functions. Sorry, I need a bit of water. It got colder in Toronto, so yeah, my nose is a bit runny. Sorry about that, but almost fine. Just wanted to talk to you about that. And just, about what? About communication functions. That's the thing. So communication functions, I think in every language, you want to learn some things like how to introduce yourself, how to talk about yourself. So you have to know, what do you do in life, who you are, where you live, how old you are, and so on. Also asking for information, asking questions. I think that's important second thing, introducing yourself, asking questions. Then expressing agreement and disagreement. That's something you got to master for sure for your foundation. Expressing your opinion and pointing out that, okay, in my opinion, or I think that, I believe that. So that's crucial also, and that's a communication function. Also making requests and offers. Like, could you, can I order this? Could I? So those things, an offer, or suggestion also. And then you can move to other two important things that I consider personally after, doing the research, getting all that certification. Description is also a function. The idea that you can describe a place, describe a person, describe a picture, describe an event. That's also a part of your foundation in every language. And then also, of course, there is no way, you still have to learn the indications of past and future. So to be able to narrate simply, so tell a story, but maybe in a simple way about the past and future. So that's what I would say is the foundation. And then also some critical grammar in every language, right? That's just the understanding of the system of tenses, which tenses to use or not to use that often, which tenses go for writing, which tenses go for speaking, and also practical applications. I like this patterns technique where you just make the lists with all the necessary sentences about your life, your experience, something you would like to be able to express. And just, again, accept the patience. You have to move very, very slowly. Don't expect yourself to learn the tense system in 1 week. It takes time. It takes time to revise, retain, and then be able to produce. That's the whole cycle. And also, once you reach that B1 level, and then you can add up more conditional sentences. I know that for every level, beginning from the intermediate level, they introduce also some simple conditional sentences, even earlier than that. But you got to understand that, for example, even this topic of conditional sentences, whether you are learning or teaching, almost in every, I'm pretty sure, in every language we have this conditional expression. So it's one of the complex topics, right? Also, the one of the complex topics that I noticed, just something my students struggle with, is just gerunds, infinitives, and articles, right? But articles, just because, for example, Russian and Ukrainian speakers don't have those articles in their language. So it takes time to master those. Also, I would say that the important part of vocabulary and grammar, what you're learning, is just this personal connection method. What I prefer to call that is just when you write all the structures, or when you write the vocabulary from each topic and try to connect it to your own life. I know it sounds obvious, but trust me, nobody does that. Almost a lot of people from different backgrounds come to my lessons every day. I work with a lot of people, right? Hours and hours of work. And they ask me the same things, how do I activate? How do I memorize that? And my job, and I love my job, I have to explain those things because, trust me, common sense is not that common. People just, sometimes they don't know. Although for some of you who are, maybe you are an experienced teacher or ESL instructor, and you're listening to that and you go of course, yes, it's obvious, yes, of course, but no. For some people, it's not, and I'm pretty happy. I'm very happy, actually, to be able to teach that and convey this idea that everything should be personally relevant to you. And also, mechanical practice, you got to move from mechanical practice or control practice to meaningful practice, meaningful use for your life. So real life application is important. In my case, and this is I'm moving, I talked a little bit about foundation. And also, of course, by the way, guys, I was creating a very similar podcast for my listeners who speak Russian. And I also was mentioning something, and I see that in my plan right now. Something I wanted to talk about is, of course, not only the grammar, right? Grammar, yes, it's all good, but a lot of people advocate for a lexical approach, and that means that you got to master the most important vocabulary topics, right? And the most important vocabulary topics, you would think what? Family, home, work, personal relationships, how to express those, time, dates, numbers, different measurements, food, shopping, daily activities that you do. That's something you would like to learn when you start and you build that foundation from the ground up. And then what else? Work education, I mentioned that. Health, body parts, right? That topic. Some just simple medical basics, medical terms, how to say I have a headache, right? In the foreign language. So health, body parts, travel, transportation. That's also important still. And of course, even before that, I would learn weather, because that's one of the common topics of a small talk, weather, seasons, yes, and then top it off with a little bit of basics to talk about technology and communication. So that's just like a little bit of vocabulary topics that I think you should cover when you learn every language. And so moving to this activation that I was talking about, a real life application. So in my case, I had when it comes to the English language, because obviously when I was growing up, I was using both Russian and Ukrainian languages just at school for learning purposes, and I always used, and I do use, Russian at home these days, even being in Canada, because my husband speaks Russian, so we speak Russian, and obviously that's one of the reasons I still cannot reduce my Russian accent to a complete, almost zero. I'm aware that I do have an accent, though I have been practicing a lot. I've been taking lessons with with professional coaches. I've got certified as a coach myself. So I still retain a little bit of traces of Russian accent, just because I cannot move away from Russian completely. And, no regrets. I mean, I love languages, and everyone has an accent, and the way you want to is not to sound like a native speaker, right? It's just, you should sound like yourself, but you should reduce your native language accent, right? Reduce your native language accent and try to implement the laws and the rules of the language that you're learning, right? And it takes time also, but we'll talk about it, and I will also create episodes just about accent training. I think that's something that fascinates me, something that I've been excited about recently, and something that I've been working with in my practice, in my work, in my business. So yeah. And in my case, real life applications and immersion came with the exchange program when I went to the USA. Well, the first time in my life, and I was 16 years old, and I went and lived in America. So if you have a chance to get this immersion, to go and speak the language, because learning online, great, yes, but if you do have a chance, go. It puts you into a very stressful situation. It tests you as a person, and also I think that's an important part, not just kind of look at the books, watch the videos, and just be in the comfort of your home. Not only that, but you gotta get out there, and you gotta use the language. So yeah, that's really important. And I think when I came back to Ukraine, because I returned from the US, I never broke any immigration laws. I'm a law-abiding citizen and in every respect, and I think whenever I go, I respect the rules and laws. So of course I got back home, and then after I did that, I knew that I need to develop some strategies and just keep this wonderful language, the English language, in my life. So I was preparing for my entrance exams. I was kind of, one of the biggest decisions in my life was to become an English teacher. And I think this American experience helped me and motivated me. And that's what I am right now. I'm an English teacher. I'm an English instructor. I help other people. So, and I think moving on to the next part, and I wanted to talk about that, and I'm looking at my plan right now. That's learning through teaching. After I came back from the USA, And my town was not that big. My town in the eastern part of Ukraine was like 200,000 people, not that big. And everybody started talking. My mom told all of our relatives, she was in the States. And to be in the United States of America back then, it was super amazing. Like, everybody wanted to go to America. That was like a dream come true, that I lived in America for 1 year. I was so proud of that. And my mom was so proud of that. So she started talking about it, and everybody was like, oh, I have a kid. Why don't you ask your daughter to tutor and just to teach English? And guess what? My mom said, why not? They are asking. It's a small business for you. Back then, of course, and people realized that I was a schoolgirl. I was in my senior year because I got back from America and I still had 1 more year to finish. But everybody, and by the way, my next episode is going to be about that, because that's very special experience. It holds a special place in my heart. Yes. Still up to this day, I am proud that I was in the USA, and I think my American experience made me who I am. So that's just the truth. I cannot hold back from telling you. And I started, learning through teaching. If you are learning a language, try to teach your spouse, your friend first. Yeah, I'm not saying like do that professionally, but just try. And my kind of checklist that I keep in mind is that I always ask myself, and it's not even about the language skill, by the way. It can be applicable, I bet, in every skill. You could ask yourself, okay, can I teach this to someone? If the answer is yes, then definitely you learned this really well. You really grasped the material, or you really grasped the skill, you got it. If the answer is no, then it means, go and learn a bit more. I was trying to master something my husband was teaching me. He's, like an IT geek, but in a good way. And he was just explaining me how he wanted to help me with podcasts. So he was writing a script and he was trying to explain me that. And I looked at the script and I looked at all the technical part and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. And, if you look at something like that, so start digging, start learning about that. And I got curious and I said, oh, why don't we do this together? So, and then he started teaching me, right? He has been teaching me lots of IT skills and lately. Just for my business, for my life. And I always go like, okay, boom, I got it. Because, I know that this second that he explained to me, I know how to use that. So boom, that's how, that's the same thing about language. And I was teaching. I was a high school student, but I was teaching, going back to this learning through teaching concept. And I was going to students' homes, and they were sometimes coming to my place to study, to learn something. And learning through explaining to others, I think that's one of the key takeaways today. If you can teach this language topic to someone, means you really understand it. And trust me, not every native speaker, if you're a native speaker listening to this, go and explain conditional sentences topic to, without any preparation. You would not be able to, right? How to convey all the meanings, how to make it make sense to someone who is not a native speaker, who is learning. If somebody asked me, just teach Russian, you're a Russian native speaker, teach Russian, I would say, gosh, people, are you crazy? No, I'm not certified to do that. I haven't had any training to teach Russian, for example, right? But it's a transferable skill. Because I'm an English teacher, I would have to figure out what are the methodologies, what are the books, and things like that. I would know how to teach myself how to teach Russian, right? That's also like an interesting part of this skill being transferable. You kind of, you became a teacher and you know how to teach other things. Yeah, you can learn. However, that was not my point, guys. My point was just understanding different learning styles, understanding different topics, identifying problem areas. These are all the things that a teacher should be able to do, and it's not an easy job. but it comes through experience. I'm pretty sure the lessons that I was giving in high school were not as great as my lessons now, because again, thanks to my professional certifications, I think I am a good instructor. Not that humble, but just saying, like, people love me in a way that I do have both professional manner and also personality. You got to have a certain personality and just love what you do. That's the important thing, I think. And so I'm moving on to the final parts of my podcast. And guys, sorry, I know that is going to be a little bit longer than 30 minutes. I was trying to do my best, but sometimes I just want to ramble with you a little bit, and that doesn't do any harm, I hope. So debunking this native environment myth, just quite quickly about that. The common misconception is that once you are in the native speaker environment, let's say you go to an English-speaking country, you become a good English speaker. That's simply not true. And this belief that you just don't have to work hard if you want to achieve C2 level, just go and live, in the UK if you want a British accent and things like that, or just go and live in America. No, guys, it doesn't work like that. When I was in America, it did not simply happen this way. It's not like I got to America and I was, boom, a perfect fluent speaker of English with no mistakes. It was not like that. No, not at all. Even the level and the language and the accent that I have now is not, is not equivalent to what I used to have, right? I have worked my way up even after I had been to the States, and then I came back, and then I pursued the degree. I worked with accent coaches. I worked with other professionals, right? So all I'm saying is that being abroad can speed up the process. Let's say you want to move to Japan, you're learning Japanese. Of course, your Japanese might be better. Or, I don't know, Chinese, right? If you want to work abroad or something. Or maybe you're moving to a European country, right? It doesn't necessarily make you a good Bulgarian speaker if you move to Bulgaria, right? So you got to put in some effort, but it definitely can speed up the progress. And that's a big myth that people believe in. They just say that, yeah, if I go there, my language will be great. It's not true. So this limitation is like a limiting belief that people have. It holds people back. And when people get here, let's say to Canada, and they're stuck in the same job because they don't dedicate the time to learn the language, right? And it's just you gotta be here, you gotta be here. You will pick up, but you gotta put in some effort. And there is scientific evidence also against this assumption. You can do the research. I've done the research also a little bit before the podcast. That is the common misconception, right? So don't believe in that. It's a myth. You got to work hard. You got to work your way up, as I like to say. And there are some alternative immersion strategies. If you can, it is speeding up the process of learning. No doubt in that. I'm not doubting that. I'm doubting just the fact that it's going to be effortless, right? I doubt this. But you could create some alternative immersion strategies for yourself, like just create an immersive environment at your home. Read some media constantly. Even if you already achieved a very high, very good, decent level of the English language, practice reading the articles, consuming media, consuming more serious and formal stuff. Maybe you're preparing for a CELPIP exam. That's what you got to do. You got to learn to read articles, to analyze them, to be able to summarize them also. And also use technology for your regular practice. You could practice around typing with ChatGPT, with AI. I'm not against this kind of practice, but I do think that you need a native speaker or a professional teacher, right? Not necessarily a native speaker. Look at me. Like, I'm not a native speaker, but I don't think I am bad at language. Yeah, it's the other way around. I can teach you a lot because I'm a good teacher, and not every native speaker is a good teacher. So when it comes to that, I would say that just choose a person whose personality you like, the vibes, the professionalism, right? And use this person to practice as your guide, as your coach, because you need this kind of regular practice with a person. AI will never replace the person, because you know what's the difference between AI and a person teacher? Because a person teacher is spontaneous sometimes. They might ask you a question that AI would never have thought of, or it would be just boom, like at some moment that was not expected. And that's the real learning. You got to learn how to react to this. That's the most important thing. Anyway, a little bit about this accent and more advanced skills. I do think that improving your accent, reducing your native language accent is very important, and a lot of teachers just overlook that. So working with professional teachers and accent coaches and improving your pronunciation should not be considered an advanced skill, but rather you gotta do this as soon as possible, and you gotta do this just alongside grammar and vocabulary. However, I would say that hiring a coach like myself, for example, because I'm not just a teacher, I use the coaching strategies and coaching sessions. This is crucial. Why is that? Because when, a coach asks you lots of questions, it guides you, it gives you the direction, especially if you already have a very decent level in the language. Sometimes we need this kind of motivation coming from someone as the source. So I would say that when it comes to kind of advanced skills, you gotta also at some point realize that you are not going to get better and better. You gotta just maintain what you have, and that should be still constant practice, constant feedback, and realizing that you need a teacher, you need someone who is a guide. And I've learned many languages, and just the most recent experience, because I learned Russian, Ukrainian, English, German, Chinese, and then French. So the most recent one was French that I learned, and I can say that hiring a tutor right from the get-go, right from the start, was the best choice. Building foundation with a tutor, and then even right now I'm at B2 level in French, and I am working with a coach, with a tutor. I have a grammar and vocabulary coach. I have a conversational French coach. So yeah, you guys, takes a lot of time, effort, and your desire. That's what I want to say. And then just always have this sanity check, the reality check. How many hours did I put in? 200 hours per level. That's just approximation, like a guideline for yourself, right? Because there are things like individual variation in learning speed and being patient and just kind of overcoming the plateau and being stuck. So all those things. And now I'm looking and realizing, guys, I gotta make this conclusion and just key takeaways. How did I achieve the C2 level in English? How do I keep learning languages? First and foremost, build a foundation. And to build a foundation, hire a professional to do that with you. Use all the real world application opportunities, but remember, be cautious about that, because the native speaker environment does not guarantee you a very good level, right? You gotta put in the effort. And yeah, common sense is not that common. And I keep telling people that, yeah, some things are obvious. They might sound really easy. Oh, I know that. But sometimes we got to hear it from someone, and we got to keep hearing that over and over again just to make it really stuck, right? To make it work. Continuous practice is important. Even when you achieve B2 level, keep practicing. Of course, depending on your goals in life and whether you need the language, you want the language. And then just my method is teaching others to reinforce your learning, right? If I can teach this topic, let's say in French, to my husband or to my relatives or to my friend, then yeah, it means that I got it. I really grasped, I really learned that, and I'm able to activate that and use that in my life. Also, some practical advice and key takeaways: that don't wait for perfect conditions, like start today. maybe you are learning English and you're listening to this podcast or watching this video right now. By the way, there are video versions of the podcast on YouTube, so feel free to watch and reach out to me, ask me questions, make, friendship with me. You can always, I'm open to any opportunity. I'm open to business with you, like just learning, and I will teach you. And yeah, because I am a teacher and I still practice, I still work in this field, and it's my business, and that's my passion. That's the most important thing. I'm passionate about that. So also embracing the plateau periods is just inevitable. You got to realize that at some point you do feel stuck, but this is just a phase. And you got to also find ways to make this learning practice personal and meaningful. Like I was telling you guys, activation, those methods, they work all the time. So C2 level is really achievable. It's not a myth that, you cannot achieve that, but you got to live this language. You got to immerse yourself so much in the language. Read, speak, study, work in this language. Then your C2 level is guaranteed, and you don't have to necessarily live in the country of this language being learned and spoken, right? So success requires strategy, and the best way to obtain this strategy is to consult, is to kind of be in touch with this person as your coach, as your guide, as your teacher. So not only time, but also effort coming from both your teacher and yourself, right? It's always good to have a coach. Remember, one last thing I'm going to tell you in this podcast today is that the journey itself is as valuable as the destination. So appreciate your learning. It's not just about getting the results. The results, yes, they are important. They are amazing. They should take place. Those results, either you're taking a test, or you're want to get that interview, or you want to get that job, or you want to move to that country. So that's important. But the journey itself is your life, right? So your learning experience is your life. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I appreciate your staying all the way till the end, and I'll see you in the next episode. I hope, you hear me, you see me. I hope that you will enjoy, and in the next episode, I will be talking about my first experience abroad, my first experience living in the US of A, in America. That's, I think, the most important experience, because as you all know, right now I'm living in Canada, in Toronto. So, or like local people say Toronto. So that's where I'm living right now. But I just really want to talk about America, because that's the experience that shaped me. So thank you so much for staying with me, and I hope to I hope you listen or watch me next time in the next episode. So take care, and bye-bye.